Alfie Kohn is an author who writes about parenting, education, and behavior. His views regarding education are very progressive and may seem ridiculous when one first hears of them. However, upon further consideration of his ideas, they are quite logical and can be very effective in the classroom. Kohn argues that students need to be an active force in their education. Whether we are considering class behavior, discipline, or assessment, Kohn argues that students should be involved in all parts of their education. He also believes that effective teaching only occurs when context is provided and when learning is integrated among various subjects. Kohn begins the article by describing 3 levels with which one can consider assessment. These 3 levels can be effectively summarized by 3 questions. Firstly, level 1, how do we grade students? Level 2, is traditional grading useful and/or necessary? And 3, why do we evaluate students at all? Level 1 criticizes assessment methods, Level 2 considers whether or not assessment actually does anything to improve student learning, and Level 3 considers assessments as purpose. Kohn then addresses some reasoning behind assessment by approaching the rationale on these 3 established levels. The first reason for assessment, which he negates, is sorting, because there are many associated problems. For instance, are students being sorted into the correct categories or grade levels? Is the teacher's marking consistent and effective enough to reliably sort these students? The second reason for assessment that Kohn criticizes is motivation. The rationale is that assessment motivates students by giving them something to strive for, high marks. However, studies have found that students are more likely to feel anxious rather than motivated when thinking about their marks. This anxiety decreases their desire to learn, and they wind up doing worse. The irony of this situation really calls attention to the fact that we as educators are doing something wrong in terms of assessment. The final reason for grading that Kohn criticizes is feedback. Feedback should provide students with a plan for improvement, but the method by which we grade often does not allow for this. Kohn then goes on to compare the demand and support models. In the demand model, students are viewed as workers whose job it is to achieve, and are blamed when they receive poor grades. This is quite an abrasive model, and treats students more like employees rather than anything else. The alternative, the support model, instead fosters student learning, and gives the teacher a much superior role. In the support model, teachers are encouraged to stimulate their students' natural inclination to learn. This is great because it encourages lifelong learning for students. Kohn provides readers with 5 principles of assessment that follow the support model, and then gives teachers 4 rules to follow when grading, if they must do so. When reflecting on Kohn's article, while keeping the Ministry of Education's growing success document in mind, one can see that they nicely overlap in 2 areas. Firstly, we look at Kohn's second-level approach to assessment. He criticizes assessment's usefulness and necessity. His main argument is that assessment, at least the way it's traditionally done, does nothing to improve student learning. The growing success document provides assessment with some function. When considering assessment both for learning and as learning, we see that it does in fact have a purpose. Assessment for learning allows students to have an increased knowledge of curriculum content because it allows them to gain descriptive feedback. Assessment as learning helps improve a student's capacity to become autonomous learners. This forces students to set goals, consider steps for improvement, and reflect on ways that they can improve. In general, assessment as learning is helping students become a better learner. When we consider the fundamental principles outlined by the Growing Success document, we see more overlap with Kohn's article. The 6th principle describes the teacher's duty to provide descriptive feedback to students. Although this is an excellent point, reducing a student's grade to a single number or letter does little to nothing for student learning. However, we do this all the time. This is Kohn's major issue with the assessment practices in place in today's education system. When Kohn criticizes sorting as a purpose of assessment using his second-level approach, he makes the point that teachers may not always be reliable and consistent in their grading. When I read this portion of the article, I was immediately reminded of a scenario that presented itself during my second placement. I had asked my students to write a short 1-page reflection on a bioethics topic that we had covered in class. The material was quite subjective, so I made myself a rubric and assigned marks in accordance with it. I marked about half of the papers and then returned after a break. When I did so, I accidentally picked up the first paper and realized that I had given the student a grade that was way too low. I'm not sure whether this was done out of carelessness or by simple mistake, but it really demonstrates the inconsistency and unreliability with which teachers can assign grades. Towards the end of the article, Kohn provides teachers with 5 principles of assessment that are in accordance with his support model. The second of these principles states that the best evidence of student understanding is their behavior. This point was made glaringly evident to me during my second placement. I had a student who showed little motivation and who seemed unable to succeed academically. I worked closely with him, despite his resistance, and he still performed poorly on assessments. During my last few days, he was writing a test that he had missed while the rest of the class worked on a lab. I frequently came around and asked about his progress, while asking him questions to direct him to the answer. He shocked me when he was able to follow all of my prompts and arrive at the answer himself. It was a really great feeling to know that I adequately utilized alternative assessment methods and that they were working. When considering ways in which this article can impact my future teaching, I kept thinking of ways in which I could provide students with formative feedback in mathematics. Rather than just giving students feedback and wishing them better luck next time, I wanted to come up with a policy that was in accordance with the supportive teacher model. If a student is bad on a math test or assignment, he or she will be provided with feedback that will hopefully help them better understand. In order to foster a positive learning environment, students in my math class will then be given an opportunity to earn back marks that they lost by completing a similar question. This will then be graded by me, and the marks that they get will be added to their original score. I believe that this is a way in which true motivation can be built, and anxiety regarding tests and assignments can be diminished. Overall, I found Kohn's views to be surprising at first. I've never considered an education system free from assessment before, but very logical and effective upon further reflection.